You have a peak, and you spin on strangers. It happens before you have decided anything. The alarm goes off, your hand finds the phone in the dark, and the thumb starts moving on its own, down through other people's mornings, other people's outrage, other people's wins. 3 minutes or 30. And by the time you set it down, the inside of your head is already a borrowed room, furnished by everyone but you. This is about the first thing you let in. Not whether the phone is good or bad, but a quieter and harsher fact. The very first input of the day sets the texture of every hour that follows. Your mind runs all day on the fuel you fed it before you were awake enough to choose. We treat the morning feed as harmless because it is small. A scroll, a glance, a few headlines while the coffee brews. But the mind does not measure input by size. It measures it by what comes first, and it takes its tempo from there. Feed it fragments, urgency, the endless twitch of the new, and it learns in the first 10 minutes that this is the speed of the day, this is the unit of attention, this is what thinking feels like now. Then you sit down to the work that needed depth, and you cannot understand why your mind keeps reaching for the next small thing. There's an old practice that knew this long before there was a feed to resist. The Christian monastic tradition called it Lectio Divina, sacred reading, and it is the deliberate opposite of the scroll in every way. You take a single short passage, not a volume. You read it slowly, then read it again. You stop and turn it over, you let it act on you, you sit with it in silence. The monks were not trying to get through material. They were reading to be formed by it, not to consume it. Where the feed asks how much you can take in, the old practice asked one thing only: what is this making of you? That is the question the morning is actually deciding, whether you ask it or not. The investor and writer Naval Ravikant put the same instinct in plainer terms for our century. He points out that the first hour belongs to you, not to the feed, and that the surest way to lose it is to hand your attention to whatever is merely new instead of what is timeless. Read the thing that was true 100 years ago and will be true in 100 more, he suggests, not the thing that will be forgotten by lunch. Because, in the end, you're what you let into your attention. Guard the door of the mind in the morning the way you would guard the door of a house, because everything that walks through it early will be living with you all day. And there's a reason this matters most at dawn, a reason written into the brain itself. The writer Daniel Pink spent a book studying the hidden patterns of timing, and he found something most of us waste without knowing it. For the great majority of people, the morning is the analytic peak, the window when the mind is sharpest at focused, demanding work. It is, quite literally, the best the brain will be all day. And what do we do with that peak? We pour it into email and the feed, the two things that need at least, and by the time we turn to the hard work, the peak has passed. Pink's point is almost unbearable once you see it. The highest quality hours of your cognition spent on the lowest quality inputs available every single morning by default. So put the three together across 15 centuries. The monks reading one line to be formed by it. Naval guarding the first hour for what is timeless. Pink measuring the peak we throw away. They are all describing the same lever. The morning is not just when you work. It is when you choose what kind of mind will be doing the working. Feed it depth first, and it runs deep. Feed it the feed first, and it runs shallow, no matter how hard you push it later. So look at what your mind is actually asking for at the start. It is not asking to be informed. It is asking to be tuned. The first input is not a meal. It is a tuning fork, and whatever note you strike, the rest of the day rings at that pitch. Strike fragmentation, and you spend the morning fragmented. Strike depth, a few slow pages of something that has lasted, and you have set the instrument to the work you actually care about. This is why protecting the first input is not a matter of willpower. It is a matter of order. You are not strong enough to take in the world's noise at 6 in the morning and then summon depth at 9. No one is. The peak does not return on command. You either spin on the deep thing first, while it is fresh and yours, or you meet the deep thing with whatever is left. And here is the freeing part. You do not have to read for an hour. You do not have to renounce the phone forever or become a monk. You only have to win the first input, the very first thing the mind tastes, before the day can choose for you. 10 minutes of something timeless, read slowly, on purpose, is enough to set the note. The feed will still be there. It will always be there, but it will be entering a mind you have already tuned instead of a mind it gets to tune. So feed the mind first and let the feed wait its turn. I give the first input of my day to something I chose before I touch anything that chose me. I read a little, slowly, to be formed by it, not a lot, quickly to have consumed it. I spend my analytic peak on the deepest work I have, not on email and the endless new. I treat the first 10 minutes as a tuning fork, and I strike the note I want the day to ring at. I guard the first hour as mine, knowing whatever I let in early will be living with me all day. I reach for what was true a century ago before I reach for what will be forgotten by lunch. I protect the peak because I cannot summon depth later from a mind I scattered at dawn. That is the morning, not a war against the phone, but a single act of order, choosing what enters the mind before the world decides for you. So choose it now, the first input, while the peak is still fresh and still yours. And if this set your note, stay with this channel, where every morning is a deliberate choice about what kind of mind meets the day. Then come back tonight for the other half of the same discipline. Because if the morning decides what enters the mind, the night decides what is allowed to stay in it. In tonight's reflection, the ancient practice of the bedtime Shema, the prayer that forgives the day's wrongs before sleep, the teacher Sharon Salzberg on meeting yourself with loving kindness, and the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron on releasing the story that keeps an old anger alive. The morning chooses what you take in. The night clears out what should never have stayed. Begin disciplined. End reflective. Now read.